The emergency klaxon screamed through the corridors of Mercy Station, like a dying animal. Dr. Elena Vasquez didn't even look up from her patient as the red lights bathed the surgical bay in crimson. "Third raid this month," she muttered, her hands steady as she worked to repair the shattered rib cage of a Kethari trader. The insectoid alien's breathing was shallow, his forelungs barely functioning after the pirate attack that had brought him here. "Doc, you need to see this," called Marcus Chen from the observation deck. The head of station security had a grim expression that made Elena's stomach drop. She sealed the last repair and activated the healing matrix. "Keep him stable, Jenny. I'll be right back." The young nurse nodded, her face pale but determined. Jenny Morrison had been on Mercy Station for only 6 months, but she'd already seen more violence than most people experienced in a lifetime. That was the reality of working on a medical station in the frontier zones. Elena stepped onto the observation deck and felt her blood turn to ice. Through the reinforced windows, she could see them approaching. It's not the usual ragtag pirate vessels they'd grown accustomed to, but a full battle fleet, sleek, predatory ships that moved with deadly precision through the void. "How many?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. 37 ships, Marcus replied, his voice tight. Vanguard-class destroyers, 3 dreadnoughts, and more fighters than our sensors can count. Elena's mind raced. Mercy Station was a medical facility protected under the Galactic Accords. It flew the neutral flag and treated patients from every species, no questions asked. But in the lawless frontier zones, the Accords were more like suggestions. "They're hailing us," reported Communications Officer Sarah Kim from her station. "Audio only, put it through." A voice filled the bridge, cold and mechanical. "Medical facility designated Mercy Station. You are harboring war criminals. Surrender them immediately or face the consequences." Elena exchanged glances with Marcus. They both knew what this was about. 3 days ago, they'd taken in survivors from a destroyed convoy, civilians fleeing the war between the Terran Federation and the Hegemony. Among them had been a Federation admiral, badly wounded but alive. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Medical Officer of Mercy Station," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her gut. "We are a neutral medical facility. Treat all patients regardless of their allegiance. If you have wounded, we will treat them as well." The response was immediate and chilling. "You have 10 minutes to surrender the war criminals. After that, we will take them by force." The comm channel went dead. Marcus was already at his station, pulling up defense protocols. "We've got 47 patients in critical condition. We can't evacuate them in time." Elena looked out at the approaching fleet. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of Mercy Station. It had enough firepower to turn the medical facility into cosmic dust. "Then we fight," she said quietly. "Elena, we're a hospital. We have minimal defenses and a crew of medical personnel." Turned to face him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made him remember why humans were called Deathworlders. "Marcus, do you know what the mortality rate was for my trauma surgery program back on Earth?" "No, I 87%. "Do you know what my graduation rate was?" Marcus shook his head. 100%. "I've never lost a patient I was determined to save, and I've never failed to protect something I cared about." "All hands, this is Dr. Vasquez. We are about to be boarded by hostile forces. Initiate Hippocratic protocol." Across the station, medical staff began moving with practiced efficiency. But they weren't preparing to surrender. They were preparing for war in the depths of Mercy Station. Something that most of the galaxy had forgotten began to stir. The humans weren't just doctors and nurses. They were survivors from a world that had tried to kill them every single day of their evolution. And now, someone was threatening their patients. The timer on the tactical display showed 8 minutes remaining. 8 minutes until the galaxy learned why you should never attack a Deathworlder hospital. Chapter 2. The Healer's Creed. 7 minutes. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the main medical bay, surrounded by her team. They were an odd collection: humans, Kethari, Zilani, and even a few hegemony defectors. All of them had come to Mercy Station for the same reason: to save lives. "Listen up," Elena said, her voice carrying across the bay. "In 6 minutes, we're going to be boarded by a battle fleet. They want Admiral Reeves, and they're willing to kill everyone on this station to get him." She paused, looking at each face in turn. "I won't lie to you. We're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Our weapons are medical lasers and surgical tools. They have plasma cannons and military-grade armor." A few of the younger staff members looked terrified. Elena had expected that. But, she continued, "We have something they don't. We know this station better than they do. We've trained for this. And most importantly, we have patients depending on us." She gestured to the medical pods around them, each containing a being fighting for their life. "That Kethri traitor in bed. 7. He has 3 children waiting for him on Proxima Colony. The Zelani engineer in bed 12. She's the sole provider for her sick mother. The human in bed 3? He's a teacher who saved 30 kids from a collapsing school." Lena's voice grew stronger. "The Hippocratic Oath says first, do no harm. But sometimes, it's the only way to do no harm is to stop those who would cause it." She turned to Marcus. "What's our defensive status?" "All medical bays are sealed and shielded. Emergency bulkheads are active. The automated defense systems are online, but they're designed to stop pirates, not a full battle fleet." "What about the staff?" 93% have chosen to stay and fight. The others are with the non-critical patients in the secure ward." Elena nodded. She'd expected as much. Medical personnel were used to facing impossible odds. They did. Yet every time someone came to them more dead than alive, Dr. Vasquez called out Jenny Morrison from her station. "I'm reading massive energy signatures. They're preparing to fire." "All hands brace for impact," Elena announced. The first salvo hit like the fist of an angry god. The station shuddered, and the lights flickered, but the shields held. "Damaged. Report minor hull breaches on decks 7 and 8. Backup power is compensating for the shield drain." Elena felt a cold smile cross her face. "They're testing us, seeing how much we can take before we break." The second salvo was heavier. The station groaned under the impact, and Elena could hear the stressed metal crying out. But again, the shields held. "They're hailing us again," Sarah reported. "Put it through. Medical facility, you have shown impressive resilience. However, our next attack will be at full power. Surrender now, or watch your patients die." Elena looked around the medical bay. Every eye was on her, waiting for her decision, she thought. About the oath she'd taken so many years ago. First, do no harm. Protect the innocent. Save lives. "This is Dr. Vasquez. I have a counter-proposal." "We're listening. You want Admiral Reeves? Come and take him." "What?" "But I warn you, this is a Deathworlder hospital. We don't surrender our patients. Not to pirates, not to warlords, and certainly not to you." There was a pause. Then, "You're making a mistake, Doctor. Humans may be resilient, but you're still just medical staff." Lena's smile turned predatory. "You know what the difference is between a human doctor and a human soldier? Enlighten us. Soldier is trained to kill. Doctor is trained to keep people alive no matter what. We're very, very good at our job." The cum went dead. "All hands, Elena," announced. "They're coming. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. And remember, we're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for theirs." She gestured to the patients around them. "Show them what happens when you threaten a Deathworlder's patients." The tactical display showed dozens of small craft launching from the battle fleet. Boarding pods, fighter escorts, and assault shuttles. They were coming in fast and hard, for minutes until contact. Elena picked up a medical laser and checked its power setting. She'd modified it earlier, increasing the output far beyond what was safe for surgery. It would burn out after a few shots. But those shots would cut through combat armor like tissue paper. Around her, the medical staff was making their own preparations. Surgical tools became weapons. Medical tricorders became tactical scanners. Healing devices became instruments of war. "Doc," Marcus said quietly, "are you sure about this?" Elena looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It was the same look she got when a patient was dying on her table. She was willing to do anything, sacrifice anything, to save them. "Marcus, I've spent my entire career fighting death, and death has never won." She turned to face the sealed blast doors that led to the docking bay. Today, it won't win either. The first boarding pod struck the outer hull with a resounding clang. Then another. Another? Here they come, Marcus whispered. Alina raised her modified laser and took aim at the blast doors. Let them come. Chapter 3. The Deathworlders gambit. The blast doors exploded inward with a deafening roar. Through the smoke and debris came the first wave of boarders, hulking. Figures in powered armor, their weapons already firing. Dr. Alina Vasquez didn't flinch. She'd seen worse things in her operating room. Now, she shouted, the medical bay erupted in controlled chaos. What the boarders had expected to find was a group of terrified medical staff cowering behind makeshift barricades. What they found instead was a killing field. Elena's modified laser cut through the first armored figure like a hot knife through butter. Beside her, Marcus was using a bone saw with surgical precision, targeting the weak points in the armored joints. The Cathari nurse, Takas, had somehow turned a medical scanner into an improvised sonic weapon that was making the boarders. Helmets ring like church bells. Sector 7 is breached, called out Sarah Kim from her position behind an overturned surgical table. They're trying to flank us through the ventilation system. Jenny, take Team 3 and seal off that route, Alina ordered, never taking her eyes off the advancing soldiers. Use the emergency sterilization protocol. Jenny Morrison nodded and led a small group of medical staff toward the ventilation access. Alina had to admit the young nurse had adapted to combat surprisingly well. But then again, she was human. Adaptability was what they did best. The boarders were advancing in a disciplined formation, their plasma rifles creating a wall of deadly energy. But Alina had spent years navigating the chaos of a trauma bay. She knew how to work in impossible conditions. Takas, cover me, she called out. The Cathari nurse unleashed another sonic burst, and Alina sprinted across the medical bay using the patient pods as cover. She reached the central console and activated the emergency protocols. Suddenly, the artificial gravity cut out. The boarders trained for combat in normal gravity found themselves floating helplessly. But the medical staff had trained for zero-G procedures. They moved through the air with practiced ease, their improvised weapons finding their targets with surgical precision. Beautiful work, Doc, Marcus called out as he used a medical clamp to disable a boarder's helmet seal. But we've got a problem. More pods are incoming, and they're targeting the patient wards. Elena's blood ran cold. The patient wards were where the most critical cases were housed. Admiral Reeves was there, but so were 37 other beings fighting for their lives. I'm going to the patient ward, she announced. Elena, that's suicide. They'll be expecting you. Then we'll have to make sure they don't see me coming. She looked around the medical bay, her mind racing. The boarders were good, but they were used to fighting soldiers. They weren't used to fighting people who thought like doctors. Marcus, I need you to create a diversion. Make them think we're retreating to the secondary medical bay. You going to do? Elena picked up a medical kit and slung it over her shoulder. I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to save my patients. Slipped through a maintenance hatch that most people didn't even know existed. The service tunnels of Mercy Station were a maze of pipes, conduits, and access ways. Alina had memorized every inch of them during her first month on the station as she crawled through the narrow spaces. She could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the walls. Plasma fire, shouting, the distinctive hum of medical equipment, being used in ways it was never designed for. She reached the patient ward just as the second wave of boarders was breaking through the emergency bulkheads. From her position in the ceiling, she could see them moving toward the medical pods with deadly intent. Admiral Reeves was in the third pod from the left, his body suspended in healing gel while nanomachines repaired the damage from his injuries. He was unconscious, defenseless, and completely dependent on her for survival. Alina had two choices. She could try to evacuate him, or she could make her stand here. She chose a third option. Dropping down from the ceiling, she landed silently. Behind the lead boarder, before he could react, she'd injected him with a neural disruptor she'd modified from a standard anesthetic. He dropped like a stone. Contact, one of the others shouted, spinning around to face her. Alina was already moving using the medical pods as cover. She knew exactly where to step, where to duck, where to hide. This was her domain, and she was the apex predator here. The boarders opened fire, their plasma bolts lighting up the room. But Alina was always one step ahead, always moving, always thinking. She reached the second boarder and jabbed him with another neural disruptor. He fell, his armor clattering against the floor. "She's just one human," the squad leader shouted. "Take her down!" But Alina was already at the environmental controls. She activated the emergency quarantine protocol, and the room filled with a fine mist of medical nanites. To normal beings, they were harmless. But she'd programmed them to interfere with the boarders' targeting systems. Now they were fighting blind. Alina moved through the mist like a ghost, her modified medical tools finding their targets with lethal precision. One by one, the boarders fell. When the mist cleared, she was standing alone among the medical pods, her patients safe and sound. But her victory was short-lived. The main blast doors exploded inward. Through the smoke came a figure that made Elena's blood run cold. It was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, encased in armor that looked like it had been forged from the metal of dead stars. The being inside was hegemony military, and from the insignia on its chest, Alina could tell it was a war commander. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," the figure said, its voice distorted by the helmet speakers. "You have caused us considerable trouble." Lena raised her modified laser, but she knew it would be useless against that armor. "You're in violation of the Galactic Accords. This is a medical facility. The Accords are a luxury we can no longer afford. The war demands sacrifices." The war commander raised its weapon, a plasma cannon that could have leveled a city block. But before it could fire, alarms began blaring throughout the station. "Sir," came a voice over the war commander's. "Come, we're reading massive energy signatures from the human ship that just dropped out of hyperspace." Alina felt a surge of hope. "What ship?" The war commander's helmet turned toward the viewports, and even through the armor, Lena could hear the being's sharp intake of breath. In the distance, dropping out of hyperspace like an avenging angel, was a ship that made the hegemony battle fleet look like toys. It was a Terran Federation dreadnought, and it was broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is the TFS Hippocrates. You are in violation of the Galactic Accords. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The war commander turned back to Alina, and she could see the calculation in its posture. It was weighing the value of Admiral Reeves against the threat of a Federation dreadnought. "This isn't over, Doctor." "Yes," Alina said quietly. "It is." The war commander and its remaining forces began their withdrawal, leaving Alina alone with her patients. But as she watched the hegemony fleet retreat, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The war was coming to the frontier zones, and Mercy Station was right in the middle of it. She looked down at Admiral Reeves, still unconscious in his healing pod, and made a decision that would change everything. Chapter 4. The Price of Mercy 3. Days had passed since the attack on Mercy Station. Repairs were ongoing, but the real damage wasn't to the hull or the systems. It was to the illusion of safety that had protected the medical facility for so long. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in her office, staring at the formal document displayed on her screen. It was a requisition order from Terran Federation Command, requesting the immediate transfer of Admiral Reeves to a secure military facility. "It's not a request, Alina," said Captain Harrison Wells, the commanding officer of the TFS Hippocrates. He was a tall man with graying hair and the kind of steady demeanor that came from years of command. "The Admiral has critical intelligence about hegemony battle plans. We need him conscious and debriefed." Alina looked up from the document. "He's not ready to be moved. His injuries were severe, and the healing process is delicate. Moving him now could cause permanent damage. The war won't wait for him to fully recover. The war can wait 3 more days." Captain Wells leaned back in his chair. "Lena, read your file. You're not just a doctor. You're a former Federation Marine medic. You understand the realities of war." Elena's expression hardened. "I understand the realities of medicine. Admiral Reeves is my patient, and he stays under my care until he's stable. even if it means more attacks on this station. Even if it means putting your staff and other patients at risk. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lena had been wrestling with it for 3 days, ever since the hegemony fleet had withdrawn. She knew they would be back, and next time they might not be so easily deterred. There's something else, Captain Wells continued. Federation intelligence has been monitoring hegemony communications. They're not just after Admiral Reeves anymore. They're planning something bigger. Elena's blood went cold. What kind of something bigger? They're calling it the Scalpel Protocol. From what we can gather, they're planning to target medical facilities across the frontier zones. They want to eliminate any safe haven for Federation personnel. Lena stood up abruptly. To attack hospitals? That's a war crime. War crimes are a luxury for the winning side, Elena. And right now, we're not winning. She walked to the window of her office, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was planning to turn places like Mercy Station into battlegrounds. The thought made her sick. What do you need from me? She asked quietly.
Help us stop them.
Admiral Reeves has the codes to access the hegemony's military networks. With those codes, we can predict their movements, maybe even prevent some of the attacks. Elena turned back to face him. And if I refuse, then you'll be responsible for every medical facility they destroy, every doctor they kill, every patient they murder. It was emotional blackmail, and they both knew it. But Elena also knew that Captain Wells was right. She had a responsibility that went beyond her individual patients. I'll need guarantees, she said finally. If I help you, if I turn Mercy Station into a military asset, I need guarantees that my staff and patients will be protected. What kind of guarantees? A permanent Federation escort, medical supplies and equipment, most importantly, a promise that Mercy Station will remain a medical facility first and foremost. Captain Wells nodded. I can arrange that. Lena activated her CUM unit. Dr. Morrison, please report to my office. Jenny Morrison arrived within minutes, looking tired but determined. The young nurse had thrown herself into the repair efforts with the same intensity she'd shown during the battle. Jenny, I need you to prepare Admiral Reeves for a controlled awakening. Use the stimulant protocols we discussed. Doctor, are you sure? His neural patterns are still unstable, I'm sure. We need him conscious, but keep him sedated enough that he won't experience pain. Jenny nodded and left to prepare the procedure. Elena turned back to Captain Wells. There's something you should know about my staff, she said. They're not soldiers, they're healers. But when someone threatens their patients, they become something else entirely. What do you mean? Lena's expression grew distant. 3 days ago, I watched a Cathari nurse turn a medical scanner into a weapon. I saw a human orderly use a bone saw to disable power armor. I saw Jenny Morrison, who couldn't hurt a fly under normal circumstances, lead a strike team against trained military personnel. She looked directly at Captain Wells. We're Deathworlders, Captain. We don't just fight to win. We fight to protect what we love. We love our patients more than our own lives. Are you saying you'll help? I'm saying we'll do whatever it takes to stop the Scalpel Protocol, but we do it our way. Captain Wells smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. An hour later, Elena stood beside Admiral Reeves's medical pod as the automated systems began the awakening process. The Admiral was a middle-aged man with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too much war. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharp with sudden awareness. Doctor, he said, his voice weak but clear. Where am I? You're safe, Admiral. You're on Mercy Station. You've been unconscious for 6 days. Admiral Reeves tried to sit up, but Elena gently pushed him back down. Easy. You've been through a lot. My ship, ... my crew, ... I'm sorry, Admiral. You were the only survivor. The pain in his eyes was more than physical. Elena had seen it before, in the faces of patients who had lost everything. Survivor's guilt was a wound that never fully healed, Admiral Captain Wells said, stepping forward. I'm Captain Wells of the TFS Hippocrates. We need to talk. The codes, Admiral Reeves said immediately. They're after the infiltration codes. Can you remember them? They're not in my memory, Captain. They're in my neural implant. But if the hegemony gets their hands on me, they can extract them. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. What would they be able to do with those codes? They could access our entire military network. Troop movements, supply lines, defensive positions. They could end the war in a matter of weeks. Captain Wells leaned forward. We need those codes, Admiral, and we need to use them to stop the Scalpel Protocol. The what? Lena explained what they had learned about the hegemony's plan to attack medical facilities. As she spoke, she watched the Admiral's face grow harder and harder. They're going to target hospitals, he said finally. They're going to kill doctors and nurses and patients. We can stop them, Captain Wells said. But we need those codes. Admiral Reeves looked at Alina, then at Captain Wells, then back at Alina. Doctor, what do you recommend? Alina was quiet for a long moment. As a doctor, her job was to protect her patient. But as a human being, her job was to protect the innocent. Recommend, she said finally, that we save as many lives as possible. Admiral Reeves nodded. Then let's do it. As Alina prepared to extract the codes from the Admiral's neural implant, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a line. Mercy Station had always been a place of healing, a sanctuary from the violence of the galaxy. But sometimes, the only way to preserve peace was to fight for it. And if the hegemony wanted to turn hospitals into battlegrounds, then they would learn. What happened when you threaten a Deathworlder's patients? The extraction would take 12 hours. 12 hours to plan, to prepare, to get ready for what was coming. Because Alina knew that once they had those codes, once they started using them, there would be no going back. The war would come to Mercy Station, and this time it would stay. She looked around the medical bay at her staff, at her patients, at the place that had become her home. Then she made a decision that would change everything. It's all hands, she announced over the com. This is Dr. Vasquez. In 12 hours, we're going to war. Epilogue. The healers' war 6 months later. The war had changed. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Mercy Station, watching as the latest convoy of refugee ships docked at the expanded medical facility. Could see the sleek forms of Federation warships patrolling the perimeter, their weapons ready for any threat. Mercy Station was no longer just a hospital. It had become something new, a fortress of healing, a symbol of resistance against those who would make war on the innocent. The morning report, Dr. Jenny Morrison said, approaching with a data pad. The young nurse had changed over the months, grown harder and more confident. She wore the insignia of a senior medical officer now, and her eyes held the kind of steady determination that came from facing impossible odds and winning. How many patients this time? Lena asked. 47 critical cases from the Proxima raid. The hegemony hit 3 medical facilities before our ships could respond. Alina nodded grimly. The Scalpel Protocol had been partially successful. Despite their best efforts, despite the intelligence provided by Admiral Reeves' codes, the hegemony had managed to destroy 17 medical facilities across the frontier zones. But they had also learned something important. Attacking Deathworlder hospitals was a mistake. Status on the hegemony prisoners? Alina asked. They're recovering well? The war commander you treated last week is asking to speak with you. Alina almost smiled. The same war commander who had tried to kill her 6 months ago was now asking for her help. He'd been captured during a failed raid on a Federation medical transport, and when his own forces had abandoned him, it had been Alina who saved his life. I'll see him after rounds, she said. As Alina walked through the medical bays, she marveled at how much had changed. The facility had tripled in size, with new sections devoted to trauma surgery, refugee care, and even a secure wing for captured enemy personnel. The staff had grown as well. Doctors and nurses from across the galaxy had volunteered to serve at what had become known as the most dangerous medical facility in the known universe, but it was also the most successful. Despite the constant threat of attack, despite the ongoing war, Mercy Station had a patient survival rate of 97.3%, the highest in galactic history. Dr. Vasquez called out to Kaz from across the main medical bay. The Cathari nurse was training a group of new arrivals in combat medicine protocols. The Federation delegation is here for the ceremony. Alina nodded. Today was the official ceremony to designate Mercy Station as a protected site under the revised Galactic Accords. It was a symbolic victory, but an important one. The galaxy was finally recognizing that medical facilities deserved special protection. As she made her way to the ceremony hall, Alina passed through the memorial wall. It contained the names of every medical worker who had died defending there. Patients during the war, there were too many names, but each one represented a life dedicated to healing. At the center of the memorial was a simple inscription. First, do no harm. Then, do whatever it takes. The ceremony was brief but moving. Representatives from dozens of species spoke about the importance of protecting medical facilities, about the courage of those who chose to heal rather than harm. But Elena's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about a conversation she'd had with Captain Wells the previous week. The war is changing, he had said. The hegemony is losing ground. Our intelligence networks are giving us a decisive advantage. When will it end? Alina had asked. Soon, maybe within the year. But that's not why I'm here, Elena. I'm here because the Federation wants to offer you a position. Alina had been surprised. What kind of position? Surgeon General of the Federation Medical Corps. You'd be responsible for overseeing medical care across the entire Federation territory. It was an honor, a recognition of everything she had accomplished. But Alina had turned it down without hesitation. My place is here, she had said, with my patients, with my staff, with Mercy Station. Now, as she watched the ceremony conclude, Alina knew she had made the right choice. Mercy Station wasn't just a hospital anymore. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there were those who chose to heal rather than harm. After the ceremony, Alina made her way to the secure wing to visit the war commander. He was sitting up in his bed, his massive frame somehow looking smaller without the intimidating armor. Doctor, he said as she entered, I wanted to thank you. For what? For saving my life, for treating me with dignity, even though I tried to kill you. Alina sat down in the chair beside his bed. That's what we do here. We heal. We don't judge. The war commander was quiet for a long moment. The war is ending, isn't it? Yes. Soon. What will happen to me? Alina looked at him, this being who had once been her enemy and was now her patient. That depends on you. The Federation is offering amnesty to hegemony military personnel who are willing to testify about war crimes. You could help us make sure this never happens again. And if I refuse, then you'll be prosecuted for your crimes. But you'll be treated fairly, and you'll receive medical care for as long as you need it. The war commander nodded slowly. Been thinking about something you said to me during the attack. You said that the difference between a human doctor and a human soldier is that a soldier is trained to kill, but a doctor is trained to keep people alive no matter what. That's right, I think I understand now. You're not just good at keeping people alive. You're good at making them want to live. Alina smiled. That's the most important part of medicine. Not just healing the body, but healing the spirit. As she left the secure wing, Alina felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. The war was ending, but the work of healing would continue. There would always be patients who needed care, always people who needed hope. She made her way to the observation deck, where she could see the stars beyond the medical facility. Somewhere out there, the fighting continued. But here, in this place they had built together, there was only healing. Jenny Morrison joined her at the observation window. Doctor, the night shift is reporting 17 new patients from the Centauri system, saying it's the worst they've seen yet. Alina nodded. Prep the trauma bays. Alert the surgical teams. And Jenny? Yes, doctor. Send a message too. The hegemony ships in the area. Tell them we have space for their wounded too. Jenny smiled. You know, they'll probably attack us again. Probably. But that's not our concern. Concern is saving lives. As Alina prepared for another long night of surgery, she thought about the inscription on the memorial wall. First, do no harm. Then do whatever it takes. It had become more than just a motto. It had become a way of life. And in a galaxy torn apart by war, sometimes the most radical act of all was simply refusing to stop caring for those who needed help. The war would end eventually. But the work of healing would continue forever, because that's what Deathworlders did. They protected what they loved, no matter the cost, and Dr. Elena Vasquez loved her patients more than life itself.